You're watching the Law and Crime Network, folks. Aaron Keller along with you this afternoon, along with Julie Rendelman, trial attorney from New York City, Law and Crime trial analyst. We have fresh action in the George Burch case out of northeastern Wisconsin. This is a Brown County trial, Green Bay. We are back with the boyfriend taking the stand. The defense claims he's the real killer. Let's listen.
She knew Aaron and Crystal and someone, and she knew that they were good people and trusted them. And they were out, going out to have a good time.
Mr. Dietrich, I believe the last area of questioning was that Nikki had left the watering hole with a group of your friends. And do you know about how long after Nikki left the watering hole did you or Greg start to receive some information that you should come down to the sardine can?
Don't exactly recall if she had said something about the sardine can in the short phone conversation we had, but probably received some text from her, I don't know, I'm guessing 15, 20 minutes after that point.
In your short phone conversation that you had with Nikki while you were still at the watering hole, was she at the sardine can at that time?
No, I remember her saying, I think they were in the parking lot in the car about to leave.
Was Nikki upset with you at that point in time?
No, she didn't seem to be.
Shortly thereafter, you indicated that you received some text messages.
Yes.
At some point, did Nikki send you a series of angry text messages?
Yes, she did.
Do you recall the content of those angry text messages?
I don't specifically recall exactly what they were. I know that, or I don't know, I don't really want to guess, but they're like, what girl am I talking to, or something on the lines of that, and some other comments that I didn't know where they were coming from. And
is it fair to say that some of those text messages were really rather upset or derogatory?
yes, they were.
This may not be pleasant, but if I read them to you, can you tell me whether or not that was a text message you believe she sent?
Yes.
Do you believe that at around 11:12 p.m. she sent you a text asking you, quote, "So what bitch you with"?
Yeah, that rings a bell, yes.
Do you recall her sending a text message that said, "Fuck you, abusive asshole"?
Yes.
Do you recall her sending a message that said, quote, "Wow, what slut are you with? Because none of your friends know"?
Yes, I do.
And another one that said, "I am not surprised. How many times have your dick been off for some whore"?
Yes, I do.
Do you recall responding to Nikki's text messages?
I believe I received those all as a bunch grouped together that I had missed. I had not looked at the phone in a few minutes or however long it was, and saw them all, and I responded back something kind of nicely, just trying to diffuse and maybe calm her down, because she seemed upset from the content of her text.
Was your response to her an angry response?
No, it wasn't. I wasn't upset.
How did it make you feel when you heard those text messages?
I was kind of puzzled. I didn't know what she was thinking, or I didn't know what was going on,
Do you recall law enforcement contacting you again on the 22nd of May?
The 22nd on that Sunday, yes.
Do you know if they attempted to get some evidence from you, some additional evidence, some DNA?
Yeah. I remember I was actually upstairs in the old bedroom at my parents' house and taking a nap with Dylan, and I remember talking, I think his name, officer's name was Mark, possibly, and he asked for DNA swab or something on that order, and they said I'd talk it over with my parents, and I was then getting concerned, with them bringing me down to the sheriff's department. I'm like, oh my God, they think I did this. And
So at that point, you were concerned that they were looking at you as a potential suspect.
Yeah, yes.
So ultimately, did you voluntarily provide that DNA sample at that time?
I know there was, they said they were gonna call back, and there's some delays in there. It went throughout the day that there was, we called them back, and then he was calling me back, and
And did you decide not to provide a sample at that time?
yes, I decided not to at that time.
And did you have any advice from anyone prior to making that decision?
Yes, I did.
I don't want specifics, but what factored in the determination not to provide the sample?
Well, with talking with my parents and everything, and the possibility that they were, looking at me and asking for DNA and stuff like that, like, we reached out to some attorneys to, get some advice just on, and they had recommended not to, for some legal process, whatever, not to give it just voluntarily, but make sure that there's a warrant for it.
And do you know ultimately was a warrant drafted and your DNA taken
Yes.
at a later date?
Yeah, and they did say that, it will be taken under, when they get a warrant, they will get a warrant for it, and they said just make sure it goes through that process or whatever for.
So your decision not to give the DNA was based in part on conversation you had with an attorney?
Yes, on their advice. Otherwise, I was leaning towards just giving it to them right away, and
Did you return to the residence on Berkeley Road at any point on the 22nd?
on Sunday night at some point, I know it was dark, my dad brought me over there, and suddenly had Greg's shoes and pair of pants on and the shirt I was wearing from that night before, and I grabbed a change of clothes and a couple dress shirts and stuff like that and shorts, and my contact stuff and overnight bag with all my stuff that I need.
And your dad was with you?
And my dad was with me. He was the one, he drove over there. And before that, we had actually gone over to the watering hole we were going to get my car, and it wasn't there. I think that was Sunday at around dusk.
So you did not have access to your car at any point on the 22nd?
No, I did not.
Your dad drove you over to Berkeley to get some clothes. How long were you there, if you can remember?
I don't know, 10, 15 minutes or something like that.
After you left Berkeley, where did you go?
Right back to my parents' house. I believe I showered, and it was just a wreck. And I don't know how much I slept that night, and it was very, very tough time that I don't like to try to recall. And
Did you remain at your parents' house then the next day, the 23rd, which was I believe a Monday?
on Monday, actually, that one attorney that we had just got some phone advice from, I had a brief meeting with them. I went to the office.
Your office?
Yeah, my parents' office, and we went out. I think we went out to get some breakfast, and I remember I was crying, and there was a bunch of people out. It was a place we went routinely for breakfast and lunch, and I just didn't want to be there. And it was probably there for a while. I did eat, and we went back to the office for a little while, and then I went back to my parents' house.
Did you return to the Berkeley residence at all on the 23rd?
No, I did not.
I know this is probably not easy, Doug, but at some point then on the 23rd, did the police return and have contact with you?
Yes, and I had contacted, or Greg had called me, I think at some point, and I was in contact with Nikki's family. Don't know exactly what times during the day, but I think at some point in the afternoon on Monday, Greg was saying, they're talking to me and they're like thinking it's you and all this stuff, and I'm like, oh my God. And I talked to Aaron. Actually, Stephens called me. This is probably, I don't know, 5 o'clock or something time frame, and asked where I was, and I said, oh, I was at my parents' house, and said that they needed to ask me a few more questions. And I was like, oh my God. And I talked to Aaron, I believe, and he's, I had a real
Aaron
short.
Kolinsky?
Yes, Aaron Kolinsky. And he said to stay strong, buddy, or something like that. And then the cops came and they arrested me.
And I'm not going to ask you about your conversations, but what were you thinking? What was going through your head when you were arrested?
Just like, I don't know. I was like, why? How am I in this position? What's going on? I didn't get it. I think I said to him that this is wrong. I was told not to. I was advised not to say anything, and I wanted to say so many things. This I had nothing to do with this. You guys are making a big mistake here, and
they informed you that you were under arrest and that it was for what they believe was the murder of Nikki Vanderheiden.
yes.
Doug, when was the last time that you personally saw Nikki alive?
It was, I think it was right after the show. I don't even really recall. I think it was right when we were going to the bathroom and said I was going to the bathroom, and just a little, hey, going to the bathroom and see you in 10 minutes, whatever, And that's the last time I saw her.
You are watching the George Burch trial out of Green Bay, Wisconsin. Critical testimony from the boyfriend of the victim. He is accused by the defense of being the real killer, but a warning, if you want to watch the son of convicted child abductor, rapist, and killer Donald Smith, you're looking at that testimony in your screen right now. If you want to keep watching that testimony in the Donald Smith case, go to lawandcrime.com. You can watch it in full there by clicking on the live tab. In the meantime, let's bring you back to the Burch courtroom in Wisconsin.
Health orientated, exercise, and we both were, I just get a jump start, and that was just something to, maybe a little additional motivation to track my activity levels.
When you started using the device, did you open it up and read the instructions in terms of how you should use it and set it up?
Yep.
Do you recall specifically how that process works?
I remember I think they told me to put it on my left wrist, and you put a setting on it to say that. Then you enter in your height, your weight, and I think your stride length or something on that order.
When you say you enter it, where do you enter it into?
It was on the phone, I believe, on the app.
At that time, did you have a smartphone?
Yes.
You're familiar with how to download apps and how to use them?
Yeah, I had numerous apps at that point.
The Fitbit device that you had, did you find it to be relatively user-friendly?
Yeah, it was pretty easy to use. I mean, it was a 30-second, a minute setup, entering the information. And
did you use the device regularly?
yes.
Kept it on all the time?
I kept it on all the time. It was even a device that you were able to shower with, and it just became like second nature that it was on my wrist and didn't even notice it was there. It would send me notifications on my phone saying, you're short of your goal here, or you've met this activity goal, and also it would send, times I did take it off, or it would say when the battery was low, and then you charge your battery, and it would be a little plug-in device that was in a USB. You plug in, you take the little piece out and put it into this little charger, which is hooked up on the computer, and an hour or two that would charge and put it back in.
Was that the only time that you would take the device off, is to charge it?
Yep.
Do you know, were you wearing that device on May 20th into May the 21st?
Yes, I was.
Were you wearing it when you were at the watering hole that night?
Yes, I was.
Did you wear it to bed that night?
Yes, I did.
Were you wearing it in the morning the next day?
Yes.
Were you wearing it when you were talking to law enforcement on the afternoon of the 21st and also in the early morning hours of the 22nd?
Yeah, I wore it all the way up until I think they maybe take it off when I was getting arrested or booked into the jail.
During the time period that you owned that device, did you check that app relatively regularly?
Yeah, pretty much on a daily basis, 1 or 2 times a day at least. And
Did you, were you able to make any determination about how accurate it was with respect to the step counting?
yeah, I had kind of tested it out. I remember walking around my kitchen table in Island and watching it on my phone. The steps would go up as I would go around and, well, doing little laps around the table.
Did you do any scientific studies in terms of how accurate it is?
No, I didn't do anything like that. Just,
Regular use and,
yeah, it just seemed to be accurate.
Judge Zukowski in Green Bay has just called a 15-minute break. Let's switch very quickly over to the Donald Smith case in Florida. This is a death penalty hearing case. The defendant is addressing the judge right now, moments after his own son testified.
Okay. May I go ahead and send the jury home? That's not okay. We still have things to do. I know that I can send them home.
Yes, sir.
Do y'all think 9:30 is a reasonable goal for them to come back?
I believe so.
Yes, sir. Okay. All right, just bring the jury in.
Your Honor,
Wait a second.
one last thing, if you want to deal with that sequestration issue before they come back in the event that they have to move us that.
You're right. I'm sorry. Sorry, Mr. Smith, if you stand again. We had talked yesterday about sequestration of the jury. Once they go out to deliberate in either stage of the trial, you have the right to have them sequestered. As you know, we tried to plan the schedule so that that doesn't become an issue, that hopefully after closing arguments and instructions, they will have enough time to make a decision. But assuming they did not have enough time to make a decision tomorrow, you had told me yesterday that you were going to waive the right to have them sequestered. Is that still correct? Or?
What happened? You chose not to testify?
Okay, so it looks like the defendant, Donald Smith, is choosing not to testify on his own behalf in his penalty phase hearing. Very anticlimactic. His son testified just moments before he stood up to address the judge as such. Julie Rendelman, not a surprise that he is continuing to remain silent.
Not a surprise at all. But I was actually more focused on what the son said, which I found so troubling, sad, and I realized that, we sit and talk about Cherish Periwinkle because that's the person, obviously, the girl who suffered the most, died so tragically. But if you start to think about what Donald Smith has done, he's caused such damage to everyone, including those closest to him. And so it's so sad, to me, it's so sad to see his son have to even be in that position.
Yeah, it looks like we're possibly taking a break in the Smith case right now. I'm not able to listen to it along with you folks at home right now, but look, it's a common presumption, and I agree. Look, when there's a sin, so to speak, it affects more than just the sinner and the victim. It ripples, and look, you have a son who now has to live with the reality that his father's a convicted abductor, rapist, and murderer.
And has been a pedophile who's been, arrested time and time again for probably the entirety of this kid's life. I mean, he talked about the fact that they did drugs when he was young, and it's only now that he actually can communicate with his father. I think no matter what happens in this case, whether Donald Smith lives or dies, his son is going to bear the brunt of what his father did.
We just listened to the end of direct testimony of the boyfriend in the Green Bay case we're covering, and it was anticlimactic as well. The state basically asked him, hey, look, did you have any role in the disappearance or not? And he just said no, and they ended it. We're going to go back to the Smith case, as it appears the judge is issuing some directions to the jury. Okay, we're going to take a break out of Smith's courtroom in Florida. Again, this is the defendant who was convicted of abducting, raping, and murdering an 8-year-old girl named Cherish Periwinkle. Just moments ago, before the defendant made the decision not to testify, his son testified by video conference. We have that pulled up. We were not able to bring it to you live because we were in the midst of critical testimony in the Burch case out of Wisconsin. So let's listen now to the defendant's son in this death penalty case in Florida.
Good afternoon, Mr. Smith. Can you introduce yourself to the jury?
My name is Donald Smith, Jr.
And Mr. Smith, what part of the country are you in right now?
Maine,
And sir, how old are you?
25.
Where were you born?
Jacksonville, Florida.
And Mr. Smith, obviously you know that my name is Julie Schlacks, and I'm the
Yes.
attorney representing your biological father, Donald Smith.
Yes.
Can you explain to the jury what memories you have of your father as you grew up?
All right. I knew he was around when I was a baby, which I don't remember, but then I remember when I was around 3 or 4 or 5, I had a toy gun and I was pointing it at him and he broke it over his knee, threw it up on the roof, and then I had some fake plastic handcuffs and he broke those. Then when I was 9, he had just got done with a 10-year prison sentence. And so I was really looking forward to seeing him, and me and his mom picked him up from a rehab, and he wasn't really interested in me at all. And that, really hurt. Yeah.
Mr. Smith, did the absence of your father, Donald Smith, the defendant in this case, help lure you into substance abuse?
It probably had something to do with it. I've had a really crazy life. Wasn't all his fault, but I didn't have that father figure around to lead me in the right ways. And definitely there was a pain there. There was definitely some abandonment issues. And when I found drugs, I wasn't seeking them to ease pain, but I found out that it did ease pain and helped me to forget. And so I just made it a habit that lasted probably 10 years.
Are you sober now?
Yes.
How long have you been sober?
About 4 or 5 years.
And does it continue to be a struggle for you?
Yeah.
Let me ask you a rather personal question, Mr. Smith. Did you ever do illegal drugs with your father, Donald Smith?
Yes.
What was the earliest age that you did illegal drugs with your father?
Um, 16.
Mr. Smith, how was it that you were able to get sober?
By the power of God, and He continues to give me strength, and God has given me a purpose and something to live for, and I've seen Him do amazing things in my life, things that are not humanly possible. I've been through some demonic stuff myself. I couldn't even say the name of Jesus. That's how you know there's power in that name,
Where are you in your life right now? Are you attending classes?
Yeah, I'm in Bible college, and I'm just pursuing the plan that God has for me one day at a time. I'm not quitting, which is something I've done my whole life. It gets hard sometimes, but I just don't quit. I just keep fighting the good fight of faith, and God takes care of me.
Mr. Smith, since your father has been institutionalized in the Duval County Jail, have you developed a relationship with him?
Yes, no one can take the place of my dad because he is my blood and he is my real dad. And I definitely benefit from him. I talk to him at least once a week, most of the time twice a week, and he gives me really good advice. me, just with everyday situations or problems that I may be going through. And we don't really talk about the past or anything. We just talk about me and my life right now. And this is something that he wasn't able to do before when he was out on the streets because he was chasing the drug, which I know exactly what that's like. It changes who you are and it changes what your priorities are, and it comes first. And he wasn't able to have this kind of relationship with me while he was doing that. We broke up on that part.
That's okay, I just letting that car go by. Mr. Smith, has your father's institutionalization helped you keep sober?
Yeah, because I could have easily ended up in prison, and part of me, feels like who would I have been if he would have done all the things that a father usually does with their kid, playing catch and going fishing and stuff. But I've still learned just as good a lesson, if not better, because he wasn't around, and I never ever got to do any of those things with my real dad. Now I know exactly what I need to do as a father. So it taught me some great lessons.
Are you closer to your biological father, Donald James Smith, than anybody else in your family at this point?
Him and my grandma, which is his mom, those are the two people I'm closest with.
Do you look forward to talking to your father now that he's inside?
Yes.
I don't have any further questions.
Any cross-examination?
No questions, Your Honor.
All right, Kelly, thank you. We
Mr.
appreciate
Smith.
it.
Thank you very much.
Testimony there from the son of Donald Smith. Donald Smith, the defendant who has been convicted of kidnapping, raping, and killing an 8-year-old girl named Cherish Periwinkle in Florida. His guilt phase ended with a conviction. The same jury that heard the first part of the trial is now hearing the second part of the trial. That's the penalty phase. Julie Rendelman, Law and Crime trial analyst, local criminal defense attorney here in New York City. You have a son being proffered by the defendant himself, and it's one of the few times the defendant has appeared to really look over. It may be just the positioning of the screen is
Right.
not directly on the witness stand.
But he doesn't appear emotional. His affect has always seems to be the same throughout the entire case, but he does seem to be looking at him.
Yes, stoic. The son talking about not having his father around. Again, the father's been incarcerated for quite some time.
Well, he's incarcerated also. It sounded like even when he wasn't incarcerated, he didn't seem to have that much of an interest with regards to the son as he was growing up. I found his statements to be sad, and I don't know if it's helping or hurting the defense's position.
My reaction while you were speaking is I'm not sure that I necessarily feel sorry for the defendant. I feel sorry for the son.
Well, one would argue that you would feel more sorry for the son if he loses his father on top of everything that he is losing, so at least there might be an argument to be made that this is a kid who has lived through such tragedy, is going to have to live with this for the rest of his life. And sometimes a jury may actually feel so bad for him that they want to save his father for him. By the way, whether he lives or dies, this son has to live with the fact that his father is a pedophile, murderer, everything that you can only imagine would be the worst thing to have to live with as a 25-year-old young man.
So we also had some discussion there that we were not able to transmit before, but just to let everybody know what happened. The defendant, Smith, has waived his right to sequester the jury, so the jury will be able to go home. Will that really play into things? In other words, will it impact the outcome?
I think it can. I think that, look, a jury is supposed to not read the media, not speak to anybody else about the case, not speak to their loved ones. Is it always possible that someone's going to be influenced by something outside of kind of the evidence that has been introduced? Of course. And so sequestration limits that possibility. So yes, I do think it can play a role. I'm not sure what role it will play.
So the jury in the Donald Smith case is getting jury instructions. We are in the midst of a break, however, in the Burch case out of Green Bay, Wisconsin. That's the George Burch case. We have a young mother who's a victim in that case. The defense is pointing the finger back at the boyfriend of the victim, saying that he's the real killer. Now, keep in mind, he was the first person arrested on suspicion of playing a role in this case. But police let him go after realizing, no, he probably wasn't involved. At least that's the state's theory. We're in the midst of a break. When we come back from that break in that courtroom in Green Bay, Wisconsin, we're going to see a cross-examination of that boyfriend. This is going to be perhaps the second most critical testimony in that case, because this is a chance for the defense team to take a few shots at the person who they say is the real killer. So you're going to want to stick around for that. In the meantime, let's listen to some testimony from earlier today from the victim's sister who was on the witness stand.
Do you know where you were when that happened?
What's that?
Do you know where you were when you received the Adderall?
Prior to the concert.
Apologize for that, folks. Clearly that was not the victim's sister. That was the friend who the boyfriend was out with around the time that the victim disappeared. So you've got some corroboration testimony about each of them being out with one another, conversations back and forth. The bottom line, Julie Rendelman, is that there were some pretty nasty charged text messages back and forth between the boyfriend and the victim.
Right.
That was some of the beginning of the boyfriend's testimony. We're expecting the boyfriend back on the stand any minute now. It looks like the jury may be coming back into the room. So what do we expect on cross-examination?
I mean, this and the defendant are their whole case. So I expect a blistering cross-examination because their position is that he's the killer. So if he's the killer, then we'll see how he holds up.
Yeah, we're going to have to see pointed questions, but the defense can't go too far, because if they go too far, this could backfire. This witness could get really hostile and say, look, I already said I'm not the guy that did it. You have it all wrong. And then if you get into that kind of a blowback, it's not going to really help.
Well, I don't think the victim, I don't think the boyfriend of the victim getting hostile would necessarily hurt the defense. Quite honestly, if he gets hostile, that might feed into the defendant's position that he's the real killer. I'm having issues with some of the evidence that maybe we haven't heard yet that kind of clears up some questions I have. Maybe it'll be cleared up a little bit through her boyfriend, but I'm very curious as to which way they're going to go, because I find it hard to imagine that he is capable of beating a guy the size of Mr. Burch to the point of unconsciousness and doing all the things that they described or believe that happened. So I'm curious to see how this is going to play out.
Yeah, I mean, the accusation is that this guy that's going to be back on the stand any minute, the boyfriend, somehow knocked out the defendant and at one point held a gun to his head, told him he had to go along with this. Look, the reason that they've got to go that way is because Wisconsin recognizes only a few statutory defenses for first-degree intentional homicide, and one of them is coercion. So unless they can find some way to wiggle it in to that language, they can't present the defense.
I understand that, but
Yeah.
I hear you.
But does it make sense?
The question becomes, is that a plausible defense? And I'm having trouble with it. I'm open-minded to the idea, and we've been going back and forth here about what our views are, whether we even without hearing and whether we believe it or not, that it's plausible. I don't buy what I'm hearing so far, but I haven't heard the evidence yet. So I'm trying my best to be open-minded, but I don't think it's plausible.
The jury's on its way back into the Burch courtroom in Green Bay, Wisconsin. We are preparing for cross-examination any second now. I think the judge is talking, so let's listen.
We can bring Mr. Dietrich back in and we'll begin our cross-examination.